you've studied a lot about how to actually transmute pain and make that something that turns into beauty. And I'm wondering if you can say a little bit more about what that process is for you. So when there's a hurt or somebody says something hurtful to you now, or your son screams at you and tells you you're the worst mom ever. If he hasn't
done it yet, but I'm sure it'll happen.
It might come at some point. And so in those moments of hurt, what is your particular process that you feel is helpful to you to honor that hurt and also have a different expression? Or is it more organic and hard to describe?
I like being hard to offend. I'm a very flawed person. I'll lead with that. That was one of my biggest concerns when I got signed to a record label was a lot of people use art as propaganda to make themselves seem more perfect than they are because they're afraid to show that they're imperfect. Thankfully, I learned while I was homeless that my imperfection was my source of safety. Being vulnerable and getting rid of my armor made me stronger and made me more safe because armor drowns you at the end of the day. You just die under the weight of your own armor. And so I was able to begin my career with this idea that the more vulnerable I am, the safer I am. The more honest I am, the safer I am. And the more I look at myself, the more uncomfortable I am. I love that. Because it means something's up. It's like a little neon sign, and if we can just rewire our brains to go, if I'm offended, yay. What's going on with me? What part of me is offended? It's a little neon sign, and we have these neon signs that are built into us that become these flashing light bulbs going, look here, I need healing, look here. And so I've just learned that when I'm uncomfortable, when I'm in pain, when I'm offended, when I have a really strong reaction, when I want to bow up, I get really extra curious. And curiosity is just a very beautiful tool because it disarms everything. It's not having judgment. It's not blaming yourself. It's not blaming the other person. It's just putting a little bit of distance between you and your brain in real time and going, that's interesting. There's a neon sign telling me to look here, look here. And so I began to see it as a positive, not a negative. I also grew up in nature and watching the rhythm of nature. The tide comes in, the tide goes out. The storms come through, the storm passes. You know, the job of a tree, again, as I look at this analogy of hardwood trees, if the tree was to grab onto every bit of weather, it would pull the tree down. So our job is just to notice the weather. Our job isn't to hang on to the weather and let it uproot us and pull us down. That isn't our job. It's not our business. Death is beautiful. I have died so many times in my life. I have had so much death in my life. I've had so much grief in my life that I've learned to see such a poetry and such a beauty that it actually brings me to tears talking about it because it's the opportunity to reinvent yourself. And we have the opportunity to redraw ourselves and to course correct over and over and over and over. And pain is the eye-opener that a lot of people need to have that opportunity to be what I call broken open. You can only be broken if you're closed. If you're already open, you can't be broken. So every time life breaks you open, say thank you. I'm going to be broken open to the best of my ability. I'm going to grieve harder than anybody else has grieved. And there's beauty in it. And so every time there's a death in my life, I really look at that as this opportunity to just let myself grieve. Don't avoid it. You're just going to prolong the inevitable, and it's going to last longer. So just get to the grieving, get to the dying, get to the pain, experience it. Don't try and avoid it. See what you have to learn from it, what brought you there in your life, because I created it. I created most of these deaths in my life, a lot of them. And then it's also rebirth. You know, the dark matter in the universe that's expanding. Our universe is ever expanding. I love physics. It's not nothing. Dark matter is the fabric of creation. Death is the fabric of creation. You're being pregnant with yourself. So every time you experience a death in your life, every time you experience pain in your life, it's the fertile ground from which you rebirth yourself. And to find poetry in it, and to spend time writing and going, okay, I'm dying and I'm in a lot of pain, and a lot of my brain and my emotional being's dedicated to that. But there's also a corner of my brain and my heart and my being that feels a glimmer of excitement. because on the horizon, there's a new me getting created. And who is that new me? What is that woman? Who is that person? Who is that being? What does she long for? And starting to ask myself those questions and getting very curious. So you're living two lives. Half of you has a foot in death, but another part of you has a foot in rebirth. And looking at that as an opportunity so that we don't stay addicted habitually to our pain, so we don't stay addicted habitually to our healing, but that we can get on to being whole. And when I went through this process with my mom, I was in my 30s, I realized I was not only broke, but I was in debt after making hundreds of millions of dollars. It was shocking and horrifying, and
She
realizing
was
a
your
lot
manager and mismanaged your finances.
Well, I can say I mismanaged my life.
Okay.
I can say that.
Mismanagement happened.
Yeah. And not only that, but just the betrayal of who I thought my mom was, the relationship that was a fantasy that I thought I was in. I was in a fantasy relationship, and I had to grieve the fantasy of the woman I thought that loved me. And then I had to grieve the realization of who the actual person was and come to terms and re-examine my life and see what was real, what wasn't. There's a lot of brainwashing. It was an incredible experience to go through. I took 2 years off from my career. I just stopped. And I went by the mirror one day, and I saw myself in my reflection, and I literally had just felt like somebody took my brain, and it was glass, and it just shattered into a million pieces, and I didn't know how to heal. And I didn't trust anybody to help. And so I was very by myself in this. And I remember this Joseph Campbell allegory of the golden statue. I don't know if you've ever read it, where there was a village, and they had a golden statue, and there was a warring tribe coming through. And so they covered the statue in mud so nobody would know its value. And it succeeded. The tribe came and left, and the statue remained. But people forgot the value of this golden statue because it remained covered in mud, and generations passed, and people just walked by this cruddy, muddy statue until a great rainstorm came, and it revealed that the statue was made of gold. For some reason, when I looked in the mirror, I went, oh, I'm not broken. I'm just covered in layers of shit and mud and hurt and shit that doesn't belong to me. But it's not who I am. And my job isn't to fix myself. My job is to do a very loving archaeological dig back to my true nature.